Hi, this is Catherine, and welcome back to Taking Tea with Catherine. I'm drinking a nice herbal infusion, a lemon ginger, in this lovely Brahma tea room that I got back in like 2003, because we're going back a little bit today. Um, yeah. Oh, I missed that place. Anyway, that's not what I'm talking about today. I'm drinking lemon ginger because it's kind of the go-to when you have a cold. Yeah, so when I got back from California, beautiful, sunny, healthy California, I got on a plane. I probably was exposed to some germ or other. Hadn't taken my vitamins in like a week. And maybe not had enough of the oranges everybody speaks of over there. I don't think I had one orange when I was over there. Anyway, needless to say, I got a nice cold. My sinuses make me sound quite attractive. Not to mention the crustiness everywhere, the more baggier eyes than usual, etc. And I was like, man, I have to go back to work. I can't take sick days right now. So I've been just trudging through work. This is my have to be in public but don't feel great face, by the way. And I have still been reading because Victober has started, and I love reading Victorian books, but I haven't had the enthusiasm I thought I was going to have because I was too busy not being able to sleep. Oh, I'm so pathetic. And and I haven't done my tea and mystery segment yet for September, which I really want to talk about because I want to move on, moving forward by moving back by talking about Victorian books. But I realize as I'm saying all these things, and I was thinking all these things the past few days, that man, I talk and complain a lot about my health on this channel and everywhere. I'm not a good sick person. I have a lot of little sicknesses, I should say, like nothing deadly yet, although I might be very dramatic about it. And I would say compared to a person with really bad health, I'm actually quite healthy. I'm very inconveniently often sick. I always blow through my sick days at work by the summer, at least. And yeah, just not, And actually, I decided, well, so maybe I can incorporate this into my channel by talking about my sickly adventures. So sometimes they're real and sometimes they're imagined. So I called it the Bookish Hypochondriac because that's basically what I am. I'm a hypochondriac. I do have certain things that are wrong with me, but a lot of times I feel the slightest thing and I'm already panicking about what it is. So I thought I have a lot of adventures in reading and book shopping and anything bookish that also coincides with some sort of sickness or some sort of inconvenient not feeling great moment. So I thought, sad cough there. What better month to start this little segment than in Victober, because the Victorians were notoriously obsessed with illness, somewhat in the Regency period too. I mean, all throughout history, there's been hypochondriacs and there's been sick people. Obviously, I mean, let's go back to the plague while we're at it. But even in the literature, there's a lot of people who get sick. I think it was wives and daughters where someone, kind of indulged in being, sick and then suddenly wasn't. I'm not. It's been years since I read Wives and Daughters, but I remember that somehow, and there was a lot of even fashion was influenced by consumption. There was a lot of germ theory going around. I think I read somewhere some article that skirts were shortened in the late 1800s because they had realized, or at least theorized, that perhaps the long skirts trailing on the ground were picking up dirt from the streets and hence germs. So that might account for suddenly the skirts starting to rise a little bit by the turn of the century, that century. So yeah, I mean, and you just you think about the Victorian invalid. You always think about these women. I don't know why it's usually women. There was also men, not just in England, but you think of people like Proust, right? But people who were often bedbound, maybe not dying, maybe not, terribly chronically ill, but sometimes just at leisure to lay around. Some of them really were sick though. So that's kind of like me in a sense. I mean, I work full time and I have a pretty active life, but I often find myself laying around, and instead of having people reading books to me, you will end up binging something on like one of the bingeable channels, streaming sites that usually something based on English literature. So I could be my own version of a Victorian invalid. So that being said, I'm going to tell you a story and then a slightly related story about my first successful foray into Charles Dickens. I'm not counting when I was, I think, in sixth grade and we read A Christmas Carol together, because when things are required reading in school, I just don't count it really, even if it was good. But for years, I read in the 90s when I really got into reading classics on my own. I read so many Victorian writers. I read George Eliot. I read Thomas Hardy. Why can't I think of anyone else right now? But I'm sure there were others that I read, and my brain is just, full of, made up or real germs. And nevertheless, I tried reading Dickens, and I must have picked the wrong one because I had the book Hard Times, which I still haven't finished. My joke is that I had a hard time reading it. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's used that very corny joke. But I looked at Dickens and I realized that I should read Dickens. I think I'd like him. I really want to get into him. And I'm wondering which other Victorian writers I read now. Not Gaskell. Okay. I'm trailing off. I trail off very much so. But, so I went online and asked a few people on one of my book sites about which Dickens should I start with? Which is one that I might actually be able to get into? And some people said David Copperfield. Some people said Great Expectations. Some people said, well, Bleak House is good, but don't start with it. And this is around, by the way, this is around the end of 2007. I came up with this question. And someone mentioned Nicholas Nickleby, and I don't know if I got the book Nicholas Nickleby then, or if I already had it, because I used to buy a lot of books and then not read them. I still do. But at some point, I got a hold of this copy of Nicholas Nickleby, which obviously I still have. It's a little worn out now, so I've obviously read it. Although things sometimes get worn out when I haven't read them. But it's an Everyman? Is that what they call it? Everyman's Library. It's about 60 years old, this particular one. It's not as old as it looks. It's a nice copy besides the fact that it's falling apart. Every page has a different description of what's going on in that part of the book. So every page, like a little bit of a spoiler. Not wholly, but you know what I mean. And so I thought I'd start with that. So slightly fast forward to approximately February 2008. So I have this book with me, and I had just adopted or took on 2 more cats. I already had a cat that I still have, Zenobia. And my sister was moving. She couldn't take her cats at the moment. So she, I took in 2 of her cats. One of them she took back later. But I kept one of them. I'm sure you're very interested in my cat stories. But the point I'm making is that I think usually when I get a new cat, as is probably evident this year, I am a little bit allergic, and sometimes my immune system doesn't quite like it. And I won't get maybe violently ill most of the time, but it just opens me up, my immune system, to not such great things. So I have to be very careful. I have to vacuum a lot. I have to do all kinds of things. And currently Freddie, he gets a lot of dander, so I have to keep him clean, use all kinds of stuff on him. But then you get on an airplane, and no matter what you do, you get sick. But anyway, in February 2008, I was ready to start Nicholas Nickleby. I woke up one day, I felt like a little bit allergy-ish. Scratchy throat, a little bit of tired. And it was cold out because, again, February in New York is not usually a warm time. You just, you just have to deal with it. But I thought maybe it's the allergies and maybe I should take a walk. So I decided to leave my apartment and take a walk. I live in Queens, New York, and did then too. And I found myself on the train going uptown to Manhattan, somewhere I almost never used to go back then. Now I go there quite often, which is Harlem. And I got off in East Harlem, around like 125th Street. Whoever knows about New York will know this stuff. The rest of you, sorry, look at a map. And look at maps. Maps are fun. And I decided for some reason to walk west. I wanted to hit Broadway. Now, in some parts of the city, that's not a very long walk. Downtown, particularly, it's a little more east of Broadway. But this part of the city in February when you're not feeling good, it is a long walk. I think you have to walk through a little park. You have to go up and down stairs. And I'm a big walker, but when I'm not feeling great, it's a bit of a challenge. I did that. I think I stopped in Starbucks to use the bathroom, walked in on somebody. Very embarrassing. And got out of there, hightailed it. Got through, drink some tea. And I don't think I had any tea then. I got all the way up to Morningside Heights, if you guys know what I mean. It's basically the area of where Columbia University is, which is beautiful if you're ever in New York. That's a lovely area to walk around, even in the winter, but you just dress warmly. And I thought I should eat, and I was near Tom's Restaurant, which is where they used to film the outside for Seinfeld. I feel like I mentioned this at one point on one of my videos, but and I thought, I've never been in there. I would like to try this place and see if it's any good to eat in. And I went in, and it's one of those places that if you're by yourself, they make you sit at the counter instead of having a booth, because it's that busy, they can't really have you have a counter to yourself. I get that, but as someone who just doesn't like eating at counters, I'm surprised that I said okay and didn't just move on, because I hate it. But I must have been really not feeling good. I was starting to feel like all kinds of, not necessarily the nauseous kind, but just the everything hurts. What is wrong with me? My head's fuzzy. So I sat at the counter. I inexplicably ordered a cheeseburger deluxe, no tomatoes, no onions, very picky. And I took out Nicholas Nickleby and I started reading it. And I specifically remember the little preface by the author, who, by the way, is Charles Dickens. And he goes on about the educational neglect in England. And it's just a little bit heavy to start with, but I just kept going. And I think I might have started a little bit of the book, the introduction to the book of what happened to the Nicklebys, etc. I'm not going to go into the whole story right now. But it's kind of a hard thing to read when you don't feel good. But I wanted to keep on. I wanted to carry on. So I was reading for a while. I barely ate that cheeseburger deluxe. I mean, I did not have an appetite. So after that, I found myself on a bus going downtown Broadway. And I usually read when I'm on a bus. Or I will look out of the window. That's a really nice route, by the way, if you're ever on the M104 bus going downtown on Broadway. It's just nice to look at the Upper West Side, but I was feeling like absolutely miserable. I could not bring myself to read, to be fascinated by anything. Oh my goodness. There was an older couple in front of me, and I remember thinking in my head, I will never make it to their age because I'm dying right now. I got home. I laid down. I had a roommate at the time. She, tried to take care of me, but I was just, my throat was killing me. I think I must have taken something that I had in the house, some over-the-counter meds. Oh, nothing was helping. The next day, I couldn't go anywhere. Sunday, stayed home, took off, went to the doctor when the week began, and it turned out I had the flu. I rarely get the flu, and I haven't had the flu since then. I have had flu shots a couple times, but even so, I rarely get the flu. I've had other things, and I'll probably go into that in other episodes, but I survived the flu, obviously. I probably had some kind of prescription, antibiotics or something like that. And as I was feeling better, I was able to keep reading Nicholas Nickleby, and when I was able to get back to work, I continued reading it, and it turned out, even though it sometimes goes off in tangents, it turned out to be one of my favorite stories. It's, it has a lot going for it as a Dickens story, and even though it rambles a little bit, as I do, it doesn't ramble maybe as much as certain other ones do, and it has a pretty satisfying ending. There is an account of someone with consumption, so perfect for this theme. And it's almost like 90 degrees out today and humid, and I'm still drinking tea because guess what? It's tea time. So I survived. But I still, even though it's years later and I remember a lot of the story and I didn't read it the entire time with the flu, I still remember this and equate it with the flu and running around Harlem like a crazy person. Now, fast forward again to May of this year, and we have a holiday in America. Most of you are probably American, but those of you who aren't, we have a little thing called Memorial Day weekend, where it's, I think, the third or fourth Monday of the year. of the month of May, we get off if you work in an office or, that kind of situation. And it's wonderful. It's a great time to take off. Do you see my cat's paw? He's washing himself. Yeah, it's a great time to have a long weekend because the weather is usually looking up. So a lot of people do barbecues. They go maybe to the beach for the first time. I usually end up going to a park or something. Often I get sick though on Memorial Day weekend. I don't know. It's terrible because you want to enjoy that nice weather and you find yourself sick. So this year, also usually on Fridays before a long weekend. Not always, but usually my job they let us go early, a couple hours early, and so you get to start your weekend. And I don't know. I was trying to think of ways to start my weekend, and I had heard that in Riverside Park, which is also on the Upper West Side of Manhattan, they had a bunch of goats that were grazing to like take care of the lawn or the garden. They ate all the weeds or whatever. They had actually got too many goats, so they overdid it. But so they ended up taking some back. But I had to see the goats. I took the bus all the way uptown. Another great bus ride. And it was a little cold, air conditioned in the bus, and I wasn't very well dressed. And you know what I mean, I didn't layer enough because I thought, oh, it's summer now, And I went to see the goats. I only saw one because I don't know where the rest of them were. But I walked up a little bit. I ended up near Grant's tomb. I was getting a little bit hungry, and I was thinking about stopping somewhere, but I was also feeling weird, like listless weird. And I ended up going to two bookshops. Book Culture are both of the names of the shop. It's a chain, lovely chain, by the way. And I was the one down the block from Tom's Restaurant that I went to, and I was in there, and I was starting to feel kind of dizzy. Like, oh, am I gonna faint in this bookshop? I mean, if I should faint anywhere, it should be at a bookshop, right? But I didn't want to faint because I'm not a Victorian invalid. Maybe I'm a Victorian indolent. But I made it through. I bought one book. I think it was one book, Love in a Cold Climate. And I ended up taking a bus home because I could take a bus home from there. You guys don't need to know all my routes. But I ended up busing through East Harlem again. And I was like, oh, all of this seems very familiar. I woke up the next day with a sore throat and sick. But not the flu. Just the same kind of similar to what I have right now. The kind of bad cold that you have to work through. And I think I'm going to make it through this cold with a little less obnoxiousness. Except this horrible... How many times did I sip this time? Anyway, so that's my lovely sickly story of Victober, my bookish hypochondriac story. Let me know what you think of this, and should I continue? I promise I will try not to go into too many digestive ailments, and if I do, I will try to use nice euphemisms and not get too gross. So if this has worked for you, great. If not, I won't do it again. I'll keep my ruminations of illness to myself. And this has been Catherine from Taking Tea with Catherine, starting to feel better, but not looking it. Have a lovely day, and I hope you feel good today.